Hello everyone, thank you so much for clicking on today's video and welcome to my channel. In today's story, OP is pregnant and she reaches out to Reddit because she feels like her sister-in-law and her sister-in-law's best friend are acting very inappropriately with their husband, but she doesn't know how to approach the situation and she also doesn't really know if she's exaggerating things in her mind. However, there is a twist in the update, but things do turn out for the best, so stay tuned for the update to find out. I do hope that you enjoy this story. If you do, please leave a thumbs up. And before I move on to the story, I just wanted to take a second and thank all of my subscribers. Thank you so much, you guys are so wonderful. For those of you that don't know, I have a personal goal of reaching 1,000 subscribers. So if you like my content and would like to support me, I would really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button. Anyways, thank you so much for your time and on to the story. I think that my sister-in-law's best friend, who's a 23-year-old female, is trying to get with my husband, who's a 28-year-old male, and I think that she's encouraging it. Am I, a 25-year-old female, delusional? My sister-in-law, a 23-year-old female, is my husband's half-sister. She was the product of their mother's infidelity. His father divorced their mother when he was 12 after he found out through a paternity test that she wasn't his. My father-in-law refused to have anything to do with my sister-in-law, but continued to have a relationship with my husband. Because of this, my sister-in-law is very clingy to my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister, and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, which is why I'm posting this here before mentioning anything to him. My husband and I bought a house last year which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometime with her friend. We said that it was fine as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend, let's call her Chloe, have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. He's a lawyer and works very long hours. With lockdown, my husband has started to work from home. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her that I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant and I don't want to accidentally expose the baby to anything risky. My sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe quarantined for 2 weeks, would they be able to come over? My husband said that it was fine. 2 weeks later, they turned up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they go straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ends up coming out after an hour and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says, "Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe then comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she's ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird, smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms that he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to quote-unquote swim every single day. Except Chloe never gets into the water. Instead, she hangs around the house in her bikini. She was previously wearing a one-piece if it makes a difference. Every single day. Whenever my husband comes to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to call my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said that Chloe could call him down for me. They shared a look and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She puts her hands on his chest and arms, stands and sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this is because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her, and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know that a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now, and it looks weird next to my husband because he's quote-unquote well-built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I know that pregnancy hormones can mess with a person's brain, so I'm wondering if I'm just looking for something that isn't there. My sister-in-law sent me a text yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week, and I really want to say no, but I know that she'll whine to my husband if I do. I ideally want to have a conversation with him before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being delusional? Too long didn't read? Sister-in-law and her friend are constantly asking to come over to use our pool, but her friend never swims. Instead, she waits around to start talking with my husband. She seems very flirtatious whenever she talks to him, but I'm not sure if it's just pregnancy hormones getting to me. Well, I read and reread all of the comments on the original post to try to figure out how I was going to bring up the issue. Turns out I didn't have to. We were watching a movie and my phone lit up with another text from my sister-in-law telling me that she was now going to be here at 1 p.m. the next day to swim with Chloe. My husband saw it and told me to tell her not to come. This is really weird behavior for my husband because he tends to do anything to accommodate my sister-in-law and very rarely refuses her anything. I asked him if something had happened and he shrugged it off and we kept watching the movie. A few minutes later, he paused the movie and said that he wanted to ask me a question. He asked if I'd noticed Chloe never swam when she came to our house. I wish that I could say that I was calm and collected like the comments were advising, but I ended up laughing hysterically. I was honestly just so relieved that he'd brought it up instead of me having to be the one to do it. I think that my husband thought that I was losing my mind. When I finally stopped laughing, he repeated the question and said that he wanted a serious answer. I said, "Of course I've noticed," and he awkwardly replied, "So you must have noticed the other things too." To summarize the conversation that followed, my husband hadn't noticed that Chloe was flirting with him the first few days because he was so busy with work. He wasn't really paying attention to anything. He said that when she started getting handsy is when he suddenly had the light bulb moment that she was into him. He says that he didn't want to unnecessarily stress me out, so he never mentioned anything. But he was worried that I'd noticed too and thought that he was interested because he hadn't immediately shut it down. He realized that we would eventually have to have this talk, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up. Oh my god, the irony. He did privately speak to Chloe and told her that he was happily married and wasn't interested in starting anything with anyone else. Apparently, she never took him seriously because she kept doing it. In the end, he called his sister on Sunday to tell her either she got her to stop or Chloe couldn't come over anymore. His sister ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me, the baby, and our relationship. She insisted that I was somehow behind his request and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure because I looked like a beach whale and Chloe was younger and hotter. He was pretty pissed at this and said that if she said something like that about me again, he would stop speaking to her. She claimed that I had baby-trapped him, and when my husband pointed out that we were already married so I didn't need to trap him, and that he was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept on insisting that I had manipulated him into feeling that way. She claimed that he was unhappy in our relationship, and he always looked tired because I was forcing him to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle, whilst I sat on my behind all day. He pointed out that he chose to be a lawyer knowing that he would have to work long hours, and I had only recently left my job, so her accusations were baseless. She said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my husband finally snap was when she said it, i.e. the baby, was already ruining everything, and that it was just going to get worse when it was born, and he should have dragged me to the clinic whilst he had the chance. He told her neither her nor Chloe were welcome in our home anymore until they apologized for how they'd been behaving and for the things my sister-in-law said. He said that he wasn't sure he could ever forgive or forget what she said about our child, even if she did apologize. and he couldn't believe that she would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, she started crying and said that she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, and that she was just scared to lose him, and that she wasn't thinking clearly. He hung up on her. He showed me his phone, and she's been calling him and texting him since and begging him to reply. He asked if she'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but he kept insisting he knew that she said something, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him the things that I mentioned in the original post and a few other things that she had said. He asked me why I never mentioned anything when she first said it, and I mentioned how he got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about his sister. And he got defensive. I pointed out he was doing it again, and after some back and forth, he admitted that maybe he was a little bit defensive when it came to her, but he promised to stop, and he wanted to make sure that we could talk about anything, including his sister. He ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. He said that it wasn't because he thought that there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently he's been speaking to his dad a lot recently, and he mentioned one thing that he regretted about his marriage with mother-in-law is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in their relationship were too big. In his current marriage, they go, and it's helped him avoid the mistakes of his first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon too. My husband thinks that my sister-in-law will eventually turn up, even if we tell her not to, but he promised that he'd deal with her if she does. So Reddit, I guess you were right. I really did just need to speak to him. Thanks for the advice and comments. I enjoy reading them all. Too long didn't read? We talked. Husband already confronted both the friend and sister-in-law. Sister-in-law said some really horrible things, so we won't be contacting her for a while. Communication is the key, folks. So guys, what do you think? Please let me know in the comments down below. I personally do not understand what on earth the sister-in-law and her best friend were thinking. It sounds like some immature teenagers talking and giggling behind everyone's back and thinking about how quote-unquote bad they are. I feel like they're the type of people that sort of went home after the interaction and then giggled amongst themselves and dissected every single situation. They probably thought that they were being so sly right in front of the oblivious OP. Whereas OP and the husband were pretty much like, what the F is wrong with those two? Also, what on earth were the sister-in-law and her best friend thinking would happen in the long run? Like, okay, so in an alternate reality, OP's husband hooks up with the best friend. What was the sister-in-law thinking? Like, I understand that some of her actions are probably fueled by her abandonment issues, so she might have felt like her brother was abandoning her for OP and the baby. That being said, back to our multiverse situation. What on earth does the sister-in-law get out of this? I feel like after a certain time, she would have ditched her best friend, especially if she felt like her brother was giving her best friend too much attention. I don't know, it's just absurd. I really think that the sister-in-law needs to go to therapy. Anyways, what did you guys think? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you did like the story, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. And please subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories from Reddit with updates.